recording announcement, if you want. So we are recording today's ritual. Most of the focus will be on the rituals presenting. If you don't want to appear on camera, please let us know. You can also adjust where you're sitting to be out of the camera view. And if you're online, you can keep your camera off and let us know in the chat you don't wish to be seen. So Devin, if you would start recording, if you haven't already. All right. Welcome to Gaia Community. We are an Earth-based pagan Unitarian Universalist congregation, meeting here every week for ritual classes, workshops, bardic circles, or forums, and with a social time beginning at 3:30. I'm Kitty Degler. I'm your MC for today's first patron selection ritual of this cycle, assisted by Devin Scrogum doing tech. Yay, Devin! Our ritualists who will be presenting patron candidates today are Kimberly Reynolds-Gier, Devin Reynolds-Gier, and Matt Scrivner. All right, so if you haven't already, please silence your beepy things so as to not disturb the ritual and to allow you to be fully present for today's activities. After the chalice lighting, we'll be asking patrons who are participating online to mute themselves. For our chalice lighting today, which is adapted from In This Sacred Space by Cheryl Block, I'm going to say a line, and then I want you to say a line, and the line I want you to say is, in this sacred space. We gather together in this sacred space. Let us be still in the quiet. In this sacred space. Let our hearts open as a butterfly's wings. And may the glow of this light shine within us. In this sacred space. We want to honor our current patron, Prometheus, and invite him to be here today, helper of humanity, but he also will be on this altar because he is one of Gaia Community's patrons. So, hail Prometheus. I lost where Matt had gone. So, welcome to week 1 of Gaia Community's Patron Selection Festival. Gaia Community has been selecting annually a patron of the year since 2003, when we first learned of the ancient Egyptian practice of temples vying with each other each year for their deity to become the city's patron. Starting today, and every other Sunday for the next few weeks, we'll be experiencing 3 nominees for next year's patron. Today, we'll be hearing from the temples of Nemetona, Gaia Community patrons from the past 20 years, and Laozi. On June 25th, we'll hear from the Morrigan, Emcee, and Athena, and week 3, July 9th, will be Ninshaber, Ganesha, and Ianus. And then following the 3 rituals, we'll have an online selection using ranked choice voting to pick our community's patron for the coming year. Our ritual will begin with a grounding, followed by a trance journey to co-create the Temple of Many Powers in our space here. We'll then visit the temples of today's 3 patron candidates. After listening to their advocates, we'll return to our present space and conclude with announcements and offering in our standard closing. So, let us begin. Before we are taken to the temple of all powers, where all these beings dwell, I invite you to take a moment to check in with yourself. So let's take a deep breath in for a count of 4, and then let it out on a count of 4. Let's do that again. One more time. And as you continue breathing slowly and deeply, consider, how do I feel today? What values matter to me? What am I seeking in matters of spiritual kinship? What needs do I seek to have fulfilled by this community? Which values and works put forward by powers do I think will best help Gaia community become a place that will serve those needs? As you consider these points, know that your needs are valued, and this selection process has as its goal the meeting of the most spiritual needs of most of members. The selection process will in no way require any member or attendee to adopt a personal patron relationship with any of the powers introduced or selected, unless that is your wish. As with all of our rights, you are invited to participate at the level you're comfortable with. Keeping your stewardship of self and belief in the good of others forward in your mind, I invite you to settle into a comfortable position. Let yourself settle in your chair. Take some deep breaths. And I invite you to focus on the flame in the chalice. Breathe in deeply and watch that single point of light as it moves and dances. Let it grow, filling all your attention, becoming the single most important thing. Let it burn away any distractions or concerns, brightening and filling your awareness. Let yourself begin to sense the sacredness of the space around you. The inherent sacredness of all space upon the earth. In this space, we will build a temple of our thoughts, intentions, imaginings, and will, we will construct around us a temple of many powers. A place you may have visited before, or may be visiting today for the first time. Allow your inner eye to see this temple taking shape around us. Allow your inner ear to hear its sounds. We are building this temple together. You are invited to share your vision with the group. And we ask that when someone calls out some truth about this temple we're building together, that you weave that into your own visualization, strengthening the space around us. What do you see when you look at this temple we are building around us? Tall columns. Let yourself notice the temple's architecture, the materials of its construction, its layout, its color. What else do you see? Many side passages. What is here inside the temple? What details do you notice? What expression of artistry? What do you see that lets you know this is a sacred space? What do you see that tells you there's power here, that there is magic here, that the divine is with us? What do you hear inside the temple? And what sounds come to you? What do you hear that lets you know that others are with you in this place? What do you hear that tells you this place is holy? What do you feel when you're standing inside this temple? What emotions come to you? By this shared construction, we establish our sacred space, our place of power and protection, our connection to the many worlds and ways of worship. And now we are ready to visit our first temple on today's journey, the Temple of Nemetona.
So I bring you the quiet blessings of Nemetona. Having constructed this elaborate temple, I ask you to consider that Nemetona's temple is not built at all, but found. She is the lady of the sacred grove. She is the lady of the stone circle, the quiet place in nature, where the only windows are the leaves of the trees that arc overhead. Nemetona's sacred spaces are at spaces where all the sounds are free to come and go. Nature is not excluded but inherent. But Nemetona's sacred spaces do have boundaries. There is an edge, and she is a protector of that edge. We say all spaces are sacred, and that's true. But not all spaces are meant for the same thing, or the same type of worship, or the same type of activity. Nemetona reminds us that this is a place set aside. This is a place to do this thing, to focus here and now, to sense that edge, and let that edge be a space where other things may bump up against, but not intrude. We here at Gaia Community have a problem with the edges of our sacred space, currently. Our space is not our own. It is not well-defined. It is not made so that we can focus and only do this one thing here and now. And that is stressful when you cannot focus, when you cannot concentrate your energy to this place, this time, this activity. So Nemetona, first and foremost, asks you to consider, how do you make those edges work? It may be by changing the space. It may be by changing your approach to the space, to how you delineate that space from others, to how you set your mind to know where the edge of your worship is, where the edge of your attention is. Because her sacred spaces are everywhere, but not anywhere, you can hone that skill. Practice that skill of finding yourself knowing where your place is in this place that you're occupying, centering yourself. You yourself have a sacred space that goes around you. When you move about the world, you bring your personal space with you. And when people bump into that space, it can be upsetting. And so the second thing to consider is how to strengthen your very own boundaries. You have a right to your own space. You have a right to allow others into that space, but also to say no. Say, not now. To say, yes, I see you. I will pay attention to you, but right now I am doing a thing. And this is the thing that I need to focus on. And that doesn't make that other thing unimportant. Later, it may be the most important thing. Later, you may invite that person or that action or that emotion into your space for some other purpose. But do it with intention. Do it so that you know what it is you want. Because if you don't know what you want, it's extremely hard to get it. Unsurprisingly, if you select Nemetona as your patron, our patron, she's going to want more outdoor ritual. That part is not optional. As I said, you can make this space work better. We can make any space work. Many of us have years and decades of experience in worship and in meditation and in practice of our spirituality. And we know that some spaces work better than others for certain types of worship or activity or concentration or meditation. And so tailor your space, tailor your energy in that space to what it is you are looking to do. And then you can do it easier, smoother, stronger, with more focus. So I ask you to consider, in this indoor space, close your eyes halfway or all the way as you see fit. And think of a place out of doors. Maybe it's a place you've been. Maybe it's a place you can only go to in your mind. Maybe it's a place that used to exist. It is no longer accessible to you in the physical world. But focus yourself in a vision of that space. And feel that space surround you. Extend your own awareness, your own space, your own Nemeton out into that space so that you and the space become one. You can feel the things moving in the space. You can feel the way the air pushes through and out, just as it pushes in and out of your lungs. You can feel the ground, or the grass, or the sand, or the water underneath you. Feel that space. And breathe. Breathe in that space. And listen. Listen in that space. And learn. Learn in that space and admire. admire in that space that you might educate. Educate in that space that you might strive. Strive in that space and love. Love in that space and breathe. Remember this space. And draw back in if you like. Hold it in your mind, but allow your awareness to come back. For all things have a time and an end. So come back to this temple of all powers. But know that you can take part of the Nemetona with you. With this physical gift, remember that whether you select Nemetona as the community patron or not, all these skills are still available to you wherever you go and wherever you find them useful. So I thank you very much for your time and your space, and I ask for your consideration as Gaia Community's patron for Nemetona in the coming year. Blessed be.
So we'll leave the temple of Nemetona and travel in our temple of all powers down the way, where we arrive at a temple to all the former patrons that Gaia Community has welcomed into our community. Thank you. I'd like to begin by telling you a story. And this is a story that you may already know, or you may already know part of, because you may have been there to see it happen. We say ritual is a time outside of time, but I'm going to ask your patience with me today as I place this ritual in history. And I place this ritual in context. We began choosing patrons in 2003, as Kitty has said. In 2003, the people of Gaia Community had decided that it was important to us that we should, being as we came from many different traditions and many different approaches to pagan worship, that we should teach these traditions of our heart to the rest of the community. And so we spent the year of 2023 learning about some of the traditions being practiced by our members, that we could more accurately reflect them, that we could share them in our services. And as part of that work, we learned about Kemetic paganism, and we learned about a tradition carried on by the Fellowship of Isis that was introduced to us as the God Auction. And in the God Auction, we would select our patron. And as Kitty said, this is based on an Egyptian practice where all of the temples of a city who had the responsibility for caring for those who needed care would throughout the year collect food and collect money and collect fine gifts that were to be given to the gods, but also given to the people in need. And At the end of the year, there was a festival week to determine who the patron of the city for the next year would be. Which deity would claim all of the unclaimed holidays in the festival calendar? Which deity had done the most to capture the hearts and the imagination of the people of the city? Which deity's temple had served the most? And this was counted by comparing the records of how much the temples had taken in donations. And this was taught to us in 2003 as an Egyptian practice, as a Kemetic practice. And we held our first patron selection in the summer of 2003. Because we were studying and learning about the Egyptian gods and Egyptian rites, our very first patron selection was limited to only gods of Egypt. And we chose our very first patron in that year, Osiris. Osiris, the Lord of life and death, Osiris, the Lord of fertility and grain, he who falls and rises, he who comes at the flood. We chose Osiris. And because our ritual year in 2003 was divided into little tiny sections, Osiris was never really our patron for the year. Osiris was our patron for a few weeks, until we left the realm of Egypt and the practices of Kemetic paganism and moved on. But we liked the idea of having a patron for the year, and we liked the idea of taking in donations that were meant to serve the temple and meant to serve the community. And we just decided that this is a practice we would keep. But since we were not in our community devoted solely to Egyptian deities, the next year, in 2004, we thought, let us do this again. But let us open the selection process to deities from all of the pantheons that we follow, all of the cultures that are our hearth cultures. And so we did. And in these days, this was a festival with a lot of theatrics, elaborate temples were built, and we collected money that supported Gaia community, and we collected food that went to Harvesters Community Food Bank. And we thought, in this process, we can do a lot of good for Gaia and for harvesters, and we can also learn what people are interested in and what they like. And in our second year, we selected Arianrhod, the Welsh goddess associated with the moon and the mirror, a goddess of magic and sovereignty, keeper of the silver wheel. Bright Arianrhod joined us as our first patron for a full year. But we did not yet really know what to do with a patron for the year. We invoked her from time to time. We learned and practiced magic. We told Welsh stories in her honor. We honored the moon. But we did not do a great deal to honor Arianrhod in this year. In our next year, we had a new innovation. Before, all of the contestants in our patron selection process, all of our potential patrons had been thought up by the ritualists. And we thought, that is not the way we wish to conduct ourselves. We wish to use the democratic process in our congregation. We wish to not only be interested in what the ritualists want, but in what the whole community wants. And so we began to solicit nominations from everyone in the community. Who would you like to see be our patron? Who would you like to see? What is important to you? And we took those nominations and we held our selection. And the next year, our patron was Lou. the Irish god of many skills, master of arts, Lou of the long arm, and we honored him. And about this time, it occurred to us that we ought to build little shrines to our patrons. And we initiated a custom that we lovingly called the God Box. And in the God Box are many things related to the deity who is our patron. It is a mini shrine. It comes out when they will appear in ritual, when we will be invoking them. It's where they keep their stuff, and usually a statue or representation of them. The God Box came in this year as well. And we just kept going. In 2006, our patron of the year was Hestia, the Greek goddess of the home and hearth. We put Hestia at the center of our practice. We focused on hospitality. We kept an eternal flame in her honor, yes, that was lit from the sun. We may be having trouble keeping a flame for her today. But we put her at the center of our space and honored her first and last. And every year, we chose a new power. In 2007, we chose Bridget, the Lady of the Forge, poetry, fire and well. In 2008, Thor, Norse god, friend of humanity, the thunder. In 2009, Thoth, Tahuti, who returned to Egypt and took for our patron the Lord of Wisdom, the Lord of Space and Time. In 2010, we chose Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. In that year, we focused on transformation, change, adaptability, joy. In 2011, Athena, gray-eyed Lady of Wisdom, became our patron. In 2012, we were looking to move into a new space, which was mostly unfinished and was going to need a lot of work, and we returned to Lou as the Master of Arts. In 2013, we honored Oshun, the Lady of Rivers, keeper of sweet things, wise mother. In 2014, from river to river, we chose Danu. In 2015, we chose Bridget again. In 2016, Dionysus, Lord of the Grape, God of Joy. 2017, we chose Gaia, who is our always patron, to be also our patron of the year. In 2018, we honored Freya, Lady of Magic, who taught us pride and power and beauty and joy. 2019, Horus, the falcon of the sun, God of kings, far-seeing. In 2020, we went online, and the world changed again. In that year, our patron was Hermes, taught us communication and magic, ways to fit into the cracks of things and to survive and keep going. About this time, we knew we needed to change. We had been needing to change. We had a problem with our patron selection. We asked ourselves, is it that the people who can give the most money control what Gaia Community does? Should it be that way? Maybe it should not be that way. And we shifted away from patron selection as a fundraiser and towards patron selection as a vote, strengthening our democratic process. Also in the Hermes year, appropriately. 2021, our patron was the mighty dead, those beloved who have gone before us. Human beings with human problems and human answers, who taught us what we should and should not do. And in 2022, we chose Prometheus, whose flame lights the top of this altar. Prometheus, the thief of fire, friend of man, maker and rebel. This is who we have been for the last 20 years. This is who we have followed. This is who has supported us and guided us. And year by year, at the end of the year, we have left the patron behind. We have formally thanked them, ended our relationship, and moved on. Some of these patrons we had for less than a year. Some of them never had a single ritual in their honor. As we have evolved in our process, the patron has become more important, more present in our week-to-week ritual work. And so, we have an opportunity here to hold a sort of 20-year reunion of all of our patrons who have come before. To remember again those lessons they tried to teach us, whether they were successful or not. To remember again oaths and promises we might have made to any of these powers. And to benefit from their wisdom and their influence as a group. I don't know about you, but lately, these past few years, I've felt like someone who is fighting a war on a great many fronts, or perhaps bailing out a boat with a great many leaks. And that every success we have had there is just some other problem springing up somewhere else. We are as a community, in an exciting place. We are in an exciting place in the outside world. A great deal that we thought were safe and secure, both within this community and in the wider world, turns out not to be as secure as we thought. And so, in times like these, I ask you if it isn't wise to call on our old allies. We as pagans often look back to see ahead. We often ask ourselves, was there something we dropped along the way that we should have held on to? And we bring it back down. And so I ask you if maybe this isn't a time to do that, to call upon these past patrons to make right our relationship with them where that needs to happen before adopting new patrons and moving forward. To call a sort of council of our gods. To say, here, in the last 20 years, we have established something of a pantheon for this community that we can turn to for wisdom and guidance. To say, hey, we face issues having to do with our home. Perhaps we could ask Hestia and Freya what they think about that. We're in a situation where we know that the climate is changing, the world is changing. Can we go to Osiris and ask about this? Can we go to our keepers of the rivers, Danu, Oshun, to Gaia, our Mother Earth? We have these relationships. These are our people we may want to call on in any case. In a year of returning to our past patrons, we have the opportunity to look at things from many perspectives. We have many cultures represented here. We have many ways of interacting with the world represented among our past patrons. I'm asking you to consider whether it's worth it to look back, to listen again to those we have already chosen, who have already supported us, who we have already formed a relationship with. As you are sitting here, and as I am sitting here, take a moment. Of all of these powers that I have named, of all of these powers that are represented as our past patrons, perhaps there are a few that you have a very close relationship with. Perhaps there are some that you do not know well at all. Ask yourself, is there someone here I should know better? Is there someone here I have outstanding promises to? Is there someone here I didn't listen to in the past who I am ready to listen to now? Those are the kinds of questions we may encounter in a year where we return to our old patrons, our past patrons. Thank you. And that is what I'm asking you to consider today. As we close up our time here in this temple, I ask you to join with me in a chant. Very simple, very easy chant that comes to us from ADF Druidry, one of the traditions we learned and taught in 2003. So I will begin and ask to join in when you catch it. Hail are the gods, hail, says hail, the holy ones, we to go. Says hail, the holy ones, we to go. Holy ones, we to go. Says hail, the holy ones, we to go. Thank you.
And now we will leave the temple of Gaia's past patrons and walk slowly down the halls to another temple, slowly moving there to the temple of Laozi.
There is so much to think about. take a few moments, contemplate these images before you, contemplate the message of Nemetona, contemplate the dancing of the flames. Allow your breath to come simply and leave in the same way. And in a few moments, I will speak to you of the teachings of Laozi. I admit to you freely, it has been a struggle to understand any of the teachings of Laozi. This is for several reasons. The first being that my mind, like perhaps many of yours, is extremely Western in the sense that I approach most things as a task, as something to accomplish. In a ritual, I think of what I need to build, of what I need to communicate and accomplish and do. That's the first problem. The second problem lies in the calculated difficulty of Chinese language. Every character of the traditional calligraphy can be drawn multiple ways, and the angle of each line changes the intent of the character. If Dao is written one way, it means simply a road. If Dao is written another way, it means the path through the wilderness. If Dao is written another way, it refers to the way of being in harmony with nature. The most frequent drawing of the character for Dao throughout Laozi's text, Dao De Jing, or, as some original texts have ordered it, the Dudao Jing, is that latter version, where the Tao is the way of being in harmony with nature. De is the Chinese character for virtue, and it holds as many or more meanings as virtue does in English, our familiar moral grounding of virtue, but also the potency, as in an herb, the virtue of it. Attempting to translate in an inclusive fashion this title, you arrive at the clumsy sounding, the canonical text of the way of being at one with nature and its virtues. Clumsy, but all-encompassing. In Laozi's teachings of the Tao, at the beginning of all things were yin and yang, a masculine force and a feminine force, or thought of another way, a force that is pulling and a force that is holding, a force that is active and a force that simply is, a force akin to gravity that is exerting and a force akin to water that is all-pervading. And when these two forces met, the first thing came into being. And from that first thing, the second, and on until the 10,000 material factors of the world as we experience it. In the teaching of the Way, a core tenet is Wei Wu Wei. Wei means to do, and Wu means not. Commonly, this phrase is translated as the incredibly redactive do without doing. If that doesn't make any sense, you're correct. In the commentaries that Mosswitz writes into the version of the Tao that I have read, Wei Wu Wei is a phrase of great contention among classical Chinese scholarship. The most agreed upon ways of interpreting it are act without overaction, or act in accordance with the flow of nature. This is, of course, not easy. Perhaps you, like I, struggled while waiting for the water to boil. Is he ever going to talk? What is going on? I can only stare at so many candles and think of so many questions on what we've heard about today. And that's on purpose. The Tao Te Ching and Taoism in general, the teachings of Laozi and the others, are a philosophical framework for existing. A year spent with the teachings of Laozi is a year spent on personal cultivation. What is personal cultivation? If you watch Chinese martial dramas, as I am wont to do, this is the process of learning martial arts, both for the strength of the thing and for the development of your spiritual core to gain fantastical powers and perhaps become, but there's a reason that those are fantasies in another translation. Personal cultivation is to seek the mastery of self. To seek the mastery of self begins with breath. We breathe artificially. Sometimes we forget to breathe. It's a thing called email apnea, where in staring at the computer screen, some part of our brain that should be automatic ceases to work, and we catch ourselves not breathing. The beginner's mind is the master's mind is another of those statements you hear when people begin talking about Taoist philosophy. And this is indeed in the core of the teachings of Laozi. But it goes even farther. Laozi asserts that a newborn infant is our physically perfect state. The newborn infant breathes because it must. It makes noise because it hungers. It reacts not at all to most outside stimulus because it hasn't the mental framework to do so. So with a free and easy breath, we begin to detach ourselves from ourselves. Frequently, I have heard in this community the phrase monkey brain. We must turn off the monkey brain, the high logic concerned with our day-to-day lives, so that we can reach into a well of power and make magic. The way is very similar, in that we must turn off the loud portions of our minds and allow ourselves to come back to the stillness, where the active force and the passive force dwell together in harmony. Lest you think I am sounding quite so cryptic for fun, I share to you the 48th of 81 stanzas from the Tao Te Ching. To pursue learning, learn more day by day. To pursue the way, unlearn it day by day. Unlearn and then unlearn again until there is nothing to pursue. No end pursued, no end ungained. Whoever means to win this world below never undertakes the task. Whoever does make that their task is not fit to win this world below. Another translation of Wei Wu Wei is act without personal involvement, act without agenda, act without attachment to results. If we were to spend a year with the teachings of Laozi, we would be seeking a spiritual life, in harmony with what is around us, with one another, and seeking to detach ourselves from the results. That we may find in so doing that everyone gains something. And to that end, I invite you, if you wish, for a cup of tea. I see Aaron making the I am not terribly mobile today. This tea is a mixture of herbs grown near Lawrence, Kansas by the Sacred Sun Farming Cooperative. There is chamomile and mint and a couple of things that I have forgotten because I foolishly put away the bag and am unattached to what was written on it. I have unlearned it, perhaps too soon.
So we're going to have an opportunity for questions of our advocates for their deities. And so if you have one, raise your hand. I'll bring around a microphone so we can ask it. And then I'll bring the microphone to the person who needs to answer. So do you have questions? Are you thinking one?
So if we were to do a patron reunion, what would that look like? Are we thinking like 18 rituals to revisit everybody?
Thank you. I think it could look like that. I think that in our progression of having a patron of the year, we've had no rituals about the patron to one ritual a year to now I think we usually have 3 or 4. We could have a year where all of the rituals were dedicated to an individual, one of the past patrons. We could also have a year where we took our ritual needs and said, who do we want to talk to about this? From our Council of the Gods, from our community pantheon. Okay, so we're having a ritual where we need healing. Fortunately, we've established a relationship with Bridget and Oshun and Rue and probably some of the other people who are represented here. Osiris. We want to have a ritual where we're doing a lot of magic. Let's call Freya and Arianrod and Hermes and Toth. I think it could look either way, so long as we remember everyone who has come before. Does that answer your question? Perfect.
Other questions?
One, I wondered if we put these into pantheons, whether they like each other.
That's always the risk, isn't it? Like if we're calling more than one person in, you know, do they get along? Do they not get along? I think there's some of our past patrons who are from the same pantheon. We know whether they get along or don't, or when they do and they don't, which is, I think, more usual. When we're working across pantheons, I think that gives us some opportunities to find points of synergy and points of contention. And I think sometimes we benefit from hearing multiple approaches, multiple perspectives on a situation, and being in the presence of that argument sometimes is very fruitful. I admit to a personal curiosity about how Freya and Oshun get along, because I feel like a lot of the things they're responsible for are very similar, and they have some similar approaches to some of it and some very different approaches to some of it. So I think that that's an interesting question for me.
Other questions?
I'm having a little difficulty imagining how we could do a ritual with Laozi, and what that would look like.
There is abundant reason to struggle with that concept, because one of the things that Laozi railed about in Chinese society was an over-reliance on ritual, especially in statecraft. So there are multiple stanzas of the Tao that specifically decry ritual artifice and fancy dress and elaborate set dressings. There's a reason I have a table with a clock on it. I think if we were to do our sort of work with the Tao, we would be looking for the aspects of ritual that we need to accomplish the harmony that we are seeking on that day, and seeking that minimum action that would allow us to move in the direction we were seeking to travel. It would be a very different sort of work than we generally do, and would probably wind up putting us in the creativity realm that we've been in for the past year, because it's so much less.
So I had a question about how is Nemetona at finding us outside spaces that can work?
So there's a lot of things going on there, right? Kansas City Metro is huge. We have, in the past, we know that this space itself has about 2 square feet of green space. It's around the trees out front. You can't hold a ritual under a tree out front. That doesn't work. So we found places. We already found places. We go to the Gorman Conservation Center. We've gone to Smooch. We've gone to Feast Park. We have, fortunately, Caw Point. More muddy that day, I think, but there was some green going on. We've gone to, we're blessed here in that Kansas City is one of the best kept park systems in the country. So we have a wide variety of places we could go. We have the creativity, I think, in the community, just like how do we do work with Laozi? I think we could say, how do we do work in green spaces that we don't own, and approach that as a challenge, not as an obstacle.
Other questions? All right then. Well, get back to where I was. Okay. So we want to thank the powers that we have visited today. Thank Nemetona, Laozi, and all those past patrons of Gaia, and Prometheus, who is our current patron. And so now, it's time to return. So I invite you to take a breath and return your attention to the flame of our chalice. That bright point of light, there are many lights. So pick a flame to put your attention on. And make that point your focus, the center of your attention. Or if you're at home, to a flame on your home altar. Allow that flame once again to become the point of your awareness and to grow brighter in your mind's eye until you feel the temple of all powers, of many powers, fading around you, until you lose sight of its wonders, until there is just that one dancing flame
filling your mind's eye. And then taking a deep breath, allow yourself to retreat from that flame, to let it dwindle back to its modest proportions, and to slowly return to the everyday world. Stretch your body and wiggle your toes and be present here and now in this space. We may journey again to the Temple of Many Powers, but that will be a story for another day. The next trip will be June 25th. So now it's time for announcements and offerings, and I forgot the leaves. You can give online through Donor Box. There is a link from on the website.
On the front page.
And if we want to pass it around today, looks like Susie's going to go get them for me. And we can even sing. So while Susie's getting the leaves, next week we're going to celebrate summer solstice. And it's also New Member Sunday. And we're excited that we can have at least one new member. So the sun's at its height, and at the same time, there are lots of changes and things to be anxious about, even as we're swimming or going to outdoor concerts and having a lot of fun. So we're going to try and marry those two together. And Susie and I thought that the best way to release anxiety was to do crafts. So we're going to make a quilt because of it, but made out of quilt squares, so that each of us can bring expression to it. So if you have paints or brushes or glitter pens or watercolor pens, you can bring those. We'll have materials too. And we'll be putting that together, as well as welcoming new members. So it should be fun. And it'll be inside here. And then the June 25th is our next patron selection ritual. And our deities will be the Morrigan, Emcee, and Athena. We have a ritual for business coming up on Saturday, June 17th at 10 a.m. And it'll be online, so you don't have to get dressed if you don't want to.
It is a special ritual for business where we are discussing, are we moving? So if you are a full active member, please come or send a proxy vote with your opinion on that. I am happy to greet anyone in advance.
And we're also approving the annual budget and talking about COVID precautions. And are there any other announcements that I've...
Friday. I was just saying.
Okay, so that would be the 16th, right?
Yeah, Friday the 16th.
Okay, so Susie, did I see you brought those leaves? All right, so we can sing. All right, ready? We can sing. Thank you. So, if we can get it and form a secret amoeba, I can do or if you don't want, if you want to stay in your chair, we'll move to you. Whatever works. All right. And I think everybody knows this, and we'll do the short form. So, this circle is all building, made the pieces of the pieces going out, and the dance of the gods and all the days, and they can help each other because lives together. And they meet, and they